Hello, fellow Westerners. I'm NewsMike. President Trump continued through the weekend to weigh a potential framework deal that could lead to a peace plan with Iran, and President Trump demanding unrestricted access by all ships to the Strait of Hormuz, that vital shipping lane off Iran's western shore. And in a Truth Social post yesterday, the president said the U.S. naval blockade will be lifted and offered hope to those in ships that have been stuck in the Strait of Hormuz for almost 3 months. The only response from Iran today was the unusual threats about peace not coming from compromise but from missiles. Where have we heard that before? Oh, yeah, the famous slogan from the Chinese Communist Party, quote, "Political power grows from the barrel of a gun." One of Chinese leader Mao Zedong's favorites. He was quite a party guy, that Mao. And U.S. War Secretary Pete Hegseth warned that the U.S. is ready to resume and more than capable of restarting attacks against Iran if a peace deal fades away. At the same time, Ukraine has turned the tide against Russia with the increasingly sophisticated drones Ukrainians are building, now used to destroy Russian convoys. The idea is to keep frontline Russian troops from getting the guns and food and relief they need from those convoys. But this is a modern marvel. Ukraine is laying landmines along those supply routes, landmines that were laid by drones. They aren't buried, they're placed among vegetation by drones. And they've become essential in demining, too. Drones can be programmed to find a buried mine and blow it up. And yes, it's often prohibited under national and international humanitarian law just to lay landmines. And thanks to Russia, Ukraine has more mines in the ground ready to kill than any other nation on earth. And today, the Russian Federation continues to store hundreds and thousands of tanks and guns and missiles along borders with nations like Poland and Baltic countries like Estonia. The buildup of supplies and infrastructure is massive. If you'll now jump with me from Europe over to far eastern Asia, there, off the islands of Japan, is Russia again, seriously building up military might there too, conducting drills that appear increasingly menacing to the leaders of Japan. The South China Post says this week that over the past 9 months, Japan has had to scramble fighter jets nearly 450 times because of Chinese and Russian airspace intrusions. And now Japan is concerned about being attacked from Russia to the west and China to the north or south, both at the same time. The Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed, but American forces have in recent weeks helped coordinate the passage of dozens of vessels in very risky and dangerous conditions. This, according to unnamed officials speaking to the New York Times. Ukraine is keeping up its assaults on Russian oil facilities. The National Security Journal now saying Ukraine drones have hit 24 out of 33. Have hit 24 out of the 33 major oil refineries in Russia and are now costing President Vladimir Putin's government $100 million a day. Russia's ability to refine oil at its lowest now in 16 years. What does that mean? Means they're pretty angry with Ukraine, Russia is. They're pretty angry with us, U.S. And as we turn our attention to Cuba, where the residents are suffering badly, we're looking over our shoulder at Russia. And in Cuba, it could cost you $300 to fill up your car right now. Some Cubans live without electricity for most of the day. Thankful but angry when the power comes on for a little while. Meanwhile, Politico reports the United States has troops in place to attack Cuba. The Pentagon is awaiting President Trump's green light. Why is the U.S. interested in Cuba right now? The island of Cuba is now a military bastion for China and Russia. There is declassified intelligence showing China has built large and elaborate facilities in Cuba collecting information on the U.S. from across the Gulf of America, and they've been there since 2019. Source, Yahoo News, and the Wall Street Journal also reported 2 years ago that China and Cuba have been setting up a new joint military training facility on the island of Cuba President Donald Trump is acting before the Chinese can base missiles now in Cuba, if they haven't already. You know, President Donald Trump has a new grip on the Republican Party, and it could translate into new victories in this year's midterm elections. The New York Times says so, citing last week's Quinnipiac poll of Republican voters, with some 73% of the GOP widely approving of the job that Trump is doing. And a data breach, more than 6 million people nationwide who had data lodged with the Carnival Corporation, the cruise lines company. Well, there's said to have been a hacking 6 weeks ago at Carnival Cruise. That's right, 6 million people nationwide have lost information like names, addresses, phone numbers, driver's license numbers, passport numbers. And the incident happened 6 weeks ago. Here in the United States, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy is criticizing the company that ran that bus service that was involved in a crash along I-95 in Virginia the other day. It was 2:35 in the morning. The driver didn't even know minimum English standards. He was unable to communicate in English, and Secretary Duffy is saying that driver is a naturalized U.S. citizen born in China. Charges are pending. Ask Democrats, what state in the United States would they like most to turn blue? The answer? Texas. Targeted number one in turning blue this coming November midterm elections, and even the top Democrat in Kentucky says the placing of Ken Paxton in the race for U.S. Senate from Texas makes it even more likely that Republicans will lose that seat this year, even if John Cornyn had won re-election. But now, wait a minute. The University of Texas at Austin's James Henson tells Politico the Democrat brand is not in good shape at all. And Republicans have a lot of practice running against Democrats, a lot of practice, even running against people like this year's Senate candidate James Tallarico. Houston, Texas, behind the Academy store along Westheimer near Voss, a man was awakened while sleeping in a dumpster Saturday. He was awakened when the recycling dumpster he was sleeping in was lifted into the air and the contents emptied into a waste management truck. The Houston Fire Department was called when the truck's driver noticed some movement there among the trash. She noticed that movement just before she hit the button to turn on the compactor. You know, that machine that hydraulically flattens the trash in order to get more trash in. Firefighters got him out to safety. But it's like my mama always said, you sleep with trash, you end up being trash. Be careful. NewsMike, so long until tomorrow.